Today's discussion will continue to discuss about the basic elements of research. Today we will discuss about hypothesis and variable. As a recap of the previous lecture, we are discussing about the concept and construct. Also we discussed about reasoning, inductive and deductive reasoning. This inductive and deductive reasoning has their own implication in different type of research. Deductive reasoning, which is also known as method of synthesis, census is an example of it, where the government collect population data or data about the characteristics, socioeconomic characteristics of the population in each 10 years, and after this collection of the facts, they draw specific conclusion like birth rate, death rate, fertility rate of the population. So, this is an example of the deductive reasoning. So, deductive reasoning is most useful or mostly used in case of exploratory research. That means, the research to gain new insight or familiarity with a new phenomena, On the other hand, inductive reasoning has its own implication in case of descriptive research or hypothesis testing research. Descriptive research, the purpose is to accurately describe the characteristics of a person, of a group or of a organization, etc. Hypothesis testing research basically tests the hypothesis of relation between variables. Now, through the process of reasoning, we arrive the logical conclusion using facts. So, these logical conclusion are the theories. So, facts are dependent on theoretical framework for its meaning. Facts are converted to theory by specifying relationship between the concept, and basic requirement for application of scientific method is defining the concept. So, that also we discussed in the previous class. So, next step is how to ask the question which will lead to new proposition. So, here come the role of hypothesis. So, theory give direction of search for facts, and hypothesis state what we are looking for. So, what is hypothesis? So, thus theory state the logical relationship between facts, and from there the new proposition can be deduced, and this new proposition can be proved true or false. If it holds, then the proposition is valid. So, this hypothesis is basically is put into test, or it leads to the empirical testing. So, what hypothesis is? So, hypothesis is a conjectural statement of relation between two or more variable. What this conjectural term means? Conjectural means it is based on facts that is not certain or that is not complete. So, hypothesis basically express relation between two or more variable. So, hypothesis must have two important quality. Firstly, that it must talk about or it must describe the relationship between two or more variables, and secondly, hypothesis must carry clear implication for its testing. So, this hypothesis is thus always written in the declarative sentence form, and this hypothesis act as an working instrument of the theory. And as I told earlier, the beauty of the hypothesis is that it can be shown it is probably true, or it can be shown it is false based on the facts collected. Now, most of the research in the social science though involve hypothesis testing, but not all the research required building hypothesis. Like in case of analytical research, where or in case of exploratory research, where the main goal is to find familiarity or new insight into a phenomena, the researcher need not to construct or proceed with the building any hypothesis. So, what is the example of hypothesis? So, example of the hypothesis is that like group study leads to the higher achievement. So, this is an example of the hypothesis. Here the two variables is, one is group study, another is the achievement or academic achievement. So, in this relation, if you look into this hypothesis, okay, this hypothesis carry clear implication for its testing. Okay. A social science student can readily conceive that what group study means, what academic achievement means, and there are a number of tools available to measure these two particular variable. But not all the hypotheses are so clear cut in nature. So, hypothesis can be classified into two broader group. One is known as substantive hypothesis, another is known as statistical hypothesis. So, alternatively, the substantive hypothesis sometimes we call it as a working hypothesis. Now, you take the example of an hypothesis. So, once again, individual having similar occupation have similar attitude towards a cognitive object. So, it is an hypothesis. It has a relation between a number of variable, means people from a particular occupation, that is occupational background, that is the one variable, another is the attitude towards a cognitive object. So, that is the another variable. But if you compare it with the previous one, so it is not readily, it looks like it cannot be readily measured. The first problem will happen, that is there are numerous occupation type. So, which occupation we are going to empirically test or look into, or which people from which occupation we are going to survey. Second part is the cognitive object. So, cognitive object may be again numerous type, it may be individual, it may be policy, it may be an organization. So, now for testing this hypothesis to be again deduced to a much more manageable form. Like if I try to deduce another hypothesis from the broader one, as an example, like teachers having similar subject speciality hold similar attitude towards the educational policy. So, now teacher is an occupation type and the cognitive object is educational policy. So, this hypothesis can be tested. It looks like that it can be empirically tested. So, the first hypothesis or broader hypothesis we are talking about, so that is an example of substantive hypothesis. It is the broader hypothesis formed mostly at the initiation of the study, and sometimes this hypothesis is alternatively called working hypothesis. The hypothesis which is formed at the initial phases of the study, which may not be that much clear cut for testing and which need to be modified in the later stage of the research. Second type of hypothesis is the statistical hypothesis. So, substantive hypothesis is broadly not directly testable. So, when you express the relation in terms of mathematics or quantity, then it become the statistics or quantity, it become the statistical hypothesis. Like the average age of the girl student, average height of the girl student in an agricultural university is less than the average height of the boy student. So, this is an example of the statistical hypothesis. Now, statistical hypothesis, it may be two type. One we call null hypothesis, another we call alternate hypothesis. So, null hypothesis, it basically a hypothesis of no relation. It assumes that the two particular variable which are part of the hypothesis, they have no relation with each other. Null hypothesis is generally expressed through a term H naught or H 0 and alternate hypothesis is popularly expressed in the form of H A. So, here I put an example of the null hypothesis, like there is no significant difference between the two sample. What will be the alternative hypothesis of it? There is significant difference between the two sample. So, alternate hypothesis is directly opposite to the null hypothesis. Null hypotheses are often formed as a general observation of the phenomena or different sociological facts. Like example, like bad parents produce bad children. So, this is an bad parent do not have any relation with producing the bad children. So, this is a form of the null hypothesis, or the fertility rate or the divorce rate may not having any relation with the social background or socioeconomic status of a person. So, this is an example of the null hypothesis. So, these are general observation about formed based on the general observation about sociological facts. So, alternate researcher always try to disapprove the null hypothesis. When we reject the null hypothesis, we told that we tell that a particular hypothesis testing is significant. So, here I put another example of the null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. The null hypothesis is that there is no relationship between the age and the ability to read the highway sign at a distance. So, what will be the alternative hypothesis of it? It will be the people's ability to read highway signs decreases with the age of a particular person, or decreases as a person get more and more older. So, this will be the alternate hypothesis. The purpose of the researcher is to accept the or verify the hypothesis and prove that the alternate hypothesis holds true based on the facts. Now, coming to the characteristics of useful hypothesis. So, there are a number of important aspects a researcher must be careful about. The first important aspect is that hypothesis must be conceptually clear. It means the hypothesis must be operationally defined and it should be understandable and communicable to the people who are involved in the or researcher communities. So, what to do to improve the conceptual clearance or conceptual clarity of your hypothesis? So, you have to, in your research outline, you have to list all the similar concept and you have to try to define the hypothesis in terms of other words or variables which are involved in the hypothesis in terms of other words means other construct, and in terms of what action it basically imply or can be done to measure it. Second important aspect is that, so hypothesis should have the empirical referent. Like I was giving the example of the working woman should not opt for the career. So, this is an example of the moral. So, this hypothesis involved moral or value judgment. So, hypothesis should not be this particular type to improve on this particular aspect. So, you have to, the researcher must look for the word like should, ought type value words. So, it does not mean that a hypothesis cannot involve or cannot test the value relation, but the target should be the scientific revelation of the fact, not the moral preachment. Thirdly, hypothesis must be specific. So, it means the researchers should not be satisfied with the general prediction. Each and every hypothesis has possibility to break it down to the more manageable empirical form. Okay. What to do to improve on this particular point? So, researcher must look for the other research article or other researches which have already been carried out on this particular area. The fourth important point for the usefulness of the hypothesis is that the hypothesis should be related to the available techniques. Means either the variables which are part of the hypothesis that can be measured with the techniques available, or it carry implication or there is a possibility to development of the required technique for measuring those particular variables which are the part of the hypothesis. And for this purpose also the researcher must look into the previous researches which are being already done in that particular area. And lastly, but most importantly, that hypothesis must be related to a body of theory. One important problem or one serious problem most of the social science student either at MSc level or at the PhD level they face, that they are unable to publish their paper into good journal. One of the major reason is that the most of our hypothesis or most of the topics we choose for the research, that is based on the interesting ideas, but without any reference to the any theory. So, at the time of the hypothesis formation, the student must remember the purpose of the research is to either refute, modify or support a theory which are already about social relation, which are already there. So, hypothesis or the hypothesis testing and the logical conclusion you generate from it generally add to the existing theories. So, until or unless your hypotheses are related to a particular theory, so it is not an valid scientific facts, and it is one of the reason that most of the Indian students sometimes they face problem or struggle with publishing their paper into good impact factor journal. So, what is the solution of this particular this particular aspect? So, only solution of this particular aspect is doing the proper review of literature. So, you have to critically look into the available researches which are already done in this particular area to find the reference of your hypothesis to the existing theories. What are the sources of hypothesis? From where you can find out the hypothetical or this tentative relation between variables. So, there may be a variety of source from where hypothesis can be deduced. The first is that empirical uniformities. Empirical uniformities simply means that common sense observation. They basically describe the pattern of scientific or behavioral pattern of a particular specific group, or they sometimes describe the folk knowledge which are there on the social relations. So, these are empirical uniformities, like higher socioeconomic status people generally they have lesser fertility rate. So, this is an general observation, or the bad parents produce bad children. This is an common sense idea, or this is an folk knowledge, okay, based on your everyday observation. These empirical uniformities may act as a source of the hypothesis building. Secondly, the hypothesis can be deduced from the relation of analytical variables. Like if you take the example of the human fertility. So, human fertility show the empirical regularities with the wealth, size of the community, region, religion, etc. So, your hypothesis may be the relation between this particular fertility or with the religion. So, that may also act as a source of hypothesis. Hypothesis originate from the science itself. So, I told that theory is deduced in an hypothetical form, or theory is often used to deduce or to build an hypothesis. So, deduced implication of the theory is hypothesis. So, that obviously it is the major source of the hypothesis. Fourthly, the analogies also can be used as an useful source of hypothesis. So, what we mean by this analogies? Like your observation into the other scientific discipline can also be used as a source of the hypothesis. Like as a social science student, you all heard the concept like social physics, social ecology. So, these particular concept, it came from the observation in the or the aspect of the other scientific discipline. So, that may also act as a source of hypothesis. Lastly, the hypotheses are also consequences of personal idiosyncratic experiences. Means as a member of the scientific community, as a researcher, as an individual, you interact with all of this like empirical uniformities, analytical variables, daily observation, all of this you interact with a certain manner, and each of these individual have their own experiences with this particular interaction. That may also act as your source of the hypothesis. So, that means the value orientation of the culture, folk knowledge, rebellion against the common idea, deviation from the observation of the deviation, social experiences, application of analogies, personal experiences, all of this can act as an source of hypothesis. Now, hypothesis is an relation between the variable. So, what variable actually is? So, variable is being told it is an empirical counterpart of the concept or construct. So, in research we actually test or we actually measure the variable, not the variable, we measure the relationship between the variables. So, in that way the most important element in the scientific research is the variables. So, what variable is? Variable simply means which vary. It may be the characteristics of an individual, it may be the characteristics of a group, it may be a thing, it may be an object whose values varies. So, variables, it is an characteristics or condition which can be observed, measured, manipulated and controlled. On the opposite side there is term like constant. So, constant simply means it cannot be, it remain constant or it remain same in the different condition. Like if you take the example of the number of days in a week, it is a constant. Okay, whatever week it is the having the 7 days. On the other hand, if you take the example like age, if you take the example of the height, if you take the example of the productivity, all are basically all varies. So, these are the example of variables. So, how to select variable for research? So, variables are selected according to the objective of the study. Objectives are formed based on the hypothesis, or objectives are the hypothesis are the direct counterpart of the objective. Another important thing is that whatever variable you select, that should be mutually exclusive and not overlapping in nature. So, variables must be clearly different from each other and it should be measurable, as I already told, and ultimate purpose is to classify. You cannot study each and every variables of each and every human being or individual. So, you have to classify them or reduce them into some generalized manner or to form some generalization. So, that means the variable should be such that it can be formed into certain categories, model or paradigm. Okay. And from the feasibility point of view, the variables in the research must be limited in number. So, now coming to the type of variables which are used in the social science research, it may be numerous type. Okay. So, this here I present the different type of the variables. The most important and commonly known variables in research is independent and dependent variable. So, dependent variable simply means a phenomena or characteristics that is hypothesized to be the outcome, effect or consequences of the some prior variable or some other variable. That means, it occurred after the some prior variable which actually affect it. So, the occurrence of that particular prior variable that happened before this happening of the dependent variable. So, that type of variable we call the independent variable. Independent variable is the cause of the dependent variable. Like if you take the example of the religion may have certain effect on the human fertility. Okay. So, religion here is an example of the independent variable and fertility is an example of the dependent variable, or teaching methods have an effect on the student achievement. So, here the different teaching methods are the example of the independent variable and achievement or academic achievement of the students, that is an example of the dependent variable. Now, this independent and dependent variable, when we look it from the behavioral point of view, okay, it become the stimulus versus response variable, like the example I was talking about. So, teaching methods, those are the stimulus, or maybe the presentation skill, achievement. So, those are the response variable. So, response means because of the stimulus what behavior, overt behavior produces in the organism. Okay. So, all these two variables together they told us, or they are known as the organismic variables. So, variable may be moderator and control variable are the another two type of variable. Now, both the moderator and control variable are actually a special type of independent variable. moderator variable is a variable which is hypothesized to exist to affect the relationship between the independent and dependent variable, or it is the cause of the dependent variable, and it is the part of your hypothesis. On the other hand, the control variable is it is a type of independent variable which exists to define to affect the relationship between one independent and dependent variable, but it is not the part of your study. Like if you are studying the effect of teaching methods on the achievement, or if you are studying the effect of ICT based teaching on the students achievement, control variable may be the availability of the ICT devices, or maybe the socio-economic status of the person, because for buying the ICT packages or internet you require certain amount of money. So, in these cases it is an control variable which does not included into the study, but may actually affect the relationship between the independent and dependent variable. So, the effect of the control variable is either eliminated, or it is minimized, or it is kept in the control by using certain statistical methods. There is another type of variable which we call the intervening or hidden variable. So, intervening variable is also a type of independent variable which affect the relation between the two or more variable which are the part of the study. But why it is called intervening or hidden? But it cannot be observed directly. So, if you in the previous discussion we talked about the construct. So, construct which is not directly observable is an example of the intervening variable. Now, the variable may be qualitative or quantitative in nature. So, qualitative variable means it cannot be manipulated after the research is started, and it consists of generally categories which cannot be ordered. Like example is like sex, color, race, religion. Okay. So, these are the example of the qualitative variable. On the other hand, the quantitative variable means ordered, the categories can be ordered. Like example are the age, size of the land, size of the group, these are all the quantitative variable. Now, variable may be active or attribute in nature. Active variable simply means which is manipulated by the researcher for the purpose of the study. Like in the studying the relationship between your teaching methods and the academic achievement. So, different teaching methods can be used to study what change is happening in the academic achievement of the student. So, teaching methods in this case is an example of the active variable. So, attribute variables means it cannot be manipulated by the researcher, it has already happened. Like anxiety. So, persons are anxious in certain condition, or there certain people have the from the birth they have the level of anxiety, it is controlled by their psychological behavior. So, you cannot manipulate that, like socio-economic status. So, this is an example of the attribute variable. Now, certain variable depending on the research condition, certain variable may be converted to the active, or it may be attribute in nature. They are always attribute type in nature. And now, the variable may be continuous or discrete also, like if you talk about height. Okay. So, you can exactly measure those things, the height, but categorical variable means it cannot be measured any arbitrary degree of fineness, means it can only be measured by counting, like the number of person in a group. So, you can only count the number. So, this is an categorical or discrete variable. So, coming to the one last type of variable, that is the extraneous variable, and it is the one of the most important variable of entire research or scientific research. What is extraneous variable? Extraneous variable is an independent variable that are not related to the purpose of the study, but may affect the dependent variable. Like if you are studying the effect of ICT based teaching on the student achievement, it may be the gender of particular student may be an extraneous variable. Maybe the girl student they achieve they react better on the ICT based intervention. So, but you did not put it, or you did not take that variable as a part of your study. So, this variable is extraneous variable. So, researcher have to be very careful about the extraneous variable, because in any research condition, especially in the social science research, there may be numerous independent and dependent variable which numerous independent variable which may affect a dependent variable, which cannot be taken as a part of the study for the feasibility point of view or for the scientific relation you are studying, but this variable will be there to affect the relationship between the independent and dependent variable. So, this variable must be controlled in some way. So, how to control the extraneous variable, we will talk about that thing in some certain other day or certain other lecture, and the effect that extraneous variable have on the dependent variable, we call them the confounding effect. So, confounding effect means an extraneous variable is operating in a research situation, that change is being caused by on a dependent variable by a independent variable that cannot be singled out, that how much amount of the effect is being caused by the independent variable and how much effect is caused by the your extraneous variable, that cannot be singled out. So, it called the confounding effect. So, it is an state of experimental situation where two or more variable change concurrently. So, you cannot spell out or you cannot single out that which variable is causing how much effect or what effect. So, now this extraneous variable may be different type. It may be situational in nature, like in a particular research condition the environmental factor may affect the participant behavior. Like if you take the previous example, the effect of ICT based teaching on the student achievement, it may be the problem with the lighting or problem with the slide projector may actually affect the achievement of the student or may affect the learning. So, that act as an situational extraneous variable in this condition. It may be the participant or person variables, means the participant feelings, participant character trait, it may affect the experiment. Okay. So, based on the participant own understanding or predisposition of a topic, that may affect his response pattern. The next type of extraneous variable is the experimenter variable. So, experimenter variable means the researcher or the experimenter, he unintentionally influence how the participant should behave. And last one is the demand characteristics type. This is also an source of the extraneous variable, or this is also an type of the extraneous variable. So, what it is? So, it is the conveying the information or clue to the participant about the purpose of the study. So, this can actually let the participant, when the participant know the outcome of the study, okay, so this may actually affect the result of the study. How to control this particular 4 type of extraneous variable? So, when the situational factor is acting as an extraneous variable, the possible solution or most feasible solution is the standardize the research condition. So, when the participant or person type extraneous variable is operating, okay, so it is the random assignment of the subject or use of the statistics is the most feasible solution. When the experimenter variable or experimenter type extraneous variable is operating, okay, so use of the double blind procedure may be useful, means both the researcher and the respondent, okay, that know they do not know the purpose of the study. And lastly, the demand characteristics variable, okay, so it is the one possible solution is the deception, means masking the purpose of the research, but it should be done keeping into mind the ethical aspect of the any particular social scientific research. So, in conclusion, today we discussed about the hypothesis and the empirical counterpart of the concept, that is the variable. What are the different type of variables used in the research, and one most important type of variable, that is the extraneous variable, its broad types and some broader solution or feasible solution to control the extraneous variable. So, for the further reading, you can go through these books and the research article I put it here. Thank you.